a tale of three sheriffs. And to start this out, I'm going to talk about my massive disappointment about what's going on in my state and the actions of Governor Ducey, someone who I've defended quite a bit because I was actually quite proud of Governor Ducey's handling of the pandemic crisis, and I thought that he was taking a much more middle ground position. One of the things that Governor Ducey did initially when he first started his shelter-in-place order, which he didn't call it shelter-in-place, but it is a shelter-in-place order. Everybody regards it as one because it does have the force of law. He actually mentioned at first that salons and barbershops would be allowed to stay open. And then after intense pressure from Kirsten Sinema and the Democrats, particularly like Gallegos, I call them, I'm sorry, the term is eluding me, but basically the usual suspects. I call them the usual suspects. Starts with Sinema, then it goes to the mayor of Flagstaff, then the mayor of Tucson, and then the mayor of Phoenix, who are all Democrats and believe in taking all your freedoms away as much as possible and exploiting this crisis in any way they possibly can. So one of the first chinks in the armor, if you will, was Ducey caving in and closing the salons and the barbershops. And so a lot of us were hoping that as of May 1st, when Governor Ducey's order expired, the salons would be allowed to open again with extensive guidelines. Certainly retail would be allowed to open again, and that hasn't been the case. So this is a news release from the 1st of May from Governor Ducey's office. It says, Governor Ducey, the Arizona Department of Health Services released guidelines for retail businesses and customers as openings resume next week. So if we get down to here about what some of the guidelines are, basically they're taking this sort of phased approach to opening up retail businesses, basically saying that starting today, Monday, that May 4th, retail businesses can sell goods through delivery service, window service, walk-up service, drive-through service, drive-up service, curbside delivery, or appointment, provided they implement sanitation and physical distancing measures. I'm going to tell you something, folks. That was happening anyway, okay? That was already happening. There was no way to police this specific area that he's talking about. If a business wanted to operate and allow people to come and pick up items at their business, nobody was stopping them. So in effect, this measure doesn't mean anything, except that the people that were really scared of fines are now able to do what everybody else was already doing anyway. It says on Friday, May 8th, businesses can resume partial openings that incorporate social distancing and sanitation measures established by the United States Department of Labor or the Arizona Department of Health Services. That's interesting too. So you can go with either rule. I don't quite understand that. But anyway, as of Friday, May 8th, they are going to basically allow retail businesses to start opening with a limited capacity, which again, I think that's something that should have happened May 1st. That should be in effect right now. Today's measure, I think, is silly because people were doing that anyway. You couldn't stop this. Under the executive order, businesses were still allowed, business owners were still allowed to go to their place of business and do things like mail order, okay? They were allowed to go to their business and, look at their inventory, set up an online store, and start doing mail order services. You don't think they weren't doing pickup? I know they were doing pickup because I went to a business that did that because I didn't want to pay the shipping cost. So I went to the business and picked up the item that I was buying. So it was happening anyway. This to me is very much a half measure and unnecessary, and I don't understand it. Other than the usual suspects that I feel like have the ear of the governor now for some reason, and he's listening to their bad advice and stuff that's not based on any kind of science or anything like that. It's just, I don't know. I was very disappointed. I got emotional about it, and I feel like there has to be a better way. Well, here's what the Maricopa County Sheriff decided to do with all this stuff going on. And again, this is the tale of three sheriffs. So this is sheriff number one. I voted for Paul Penzone. I voted for him because I was very upset that Sheriff Arpaio got himself into the mess that he got himself in. I don't think a sitting sheriff should be under indictment from the feds. I don't. I think that's a bad look, and I was not willing to support that. And I am a registered Republican, and I voted for Penzone. Okay. So Penzone says efforts to manage MCSO resources being misrepresented. And this is hot off the presses. This is dated today at 11:35 a.m. So this is only a few hours old. It says, despite what you may have seen on social media, Maricopa County Sheriff Paul Penzone said he isn't encouraging citizens to snitch on fellow Arizonans over violations of the state's coronavirus stay-at-home order. In fact, his deputies aren't making arrests or writing citations related to the order. As far as I know, that is true, okay? But I have heard multiple reports that deputies have shown up at businesses that plan to open on Friday because many businesses were going to open on Friday. That's a fact. And I have heard many accounts that deputies showed up at those businesses because those businesses were ratted on by somebody, and they were told if they opened up, they were going to face extensive fines and the loss of their business license. I've seen many reports of that from individual people reporting that happened to them as they were preparing to open. And I know for a fact many businesses were preparing to open on Friday because Governor Ducey dragged his feet for a very long time, and nobody knew what was going to happen, and everybody assumed once his order expired, businesses could reopen. And then he decided to, at the last minute, he decided to go ahead and extend his order until mid-May. So what is the sheriff doing, and what is he advocating in his own words? So as we go down this article, he said, Penzone said civilian investigators will look into tips and report back to supervisors who will in turn determine whether Metro Phoenix deputies should be dispatched. It says, and rather than arrest possible violators or write tickets, deputies will leave it up to the Maricopa County's attorney's office to decide if charges should be pressed. Quote, we are just going to write up a report and let the prosecutor's office determine if, in fact, there is a criminal offense, he said. So what he's saying is absolutely he is encouraging the Rat Patrol, and he's deferring it to someone else because he doesn't have the guts to make a determination on his own that, you know what, we're not going to enforce these stupid orders. They're not constitutional. They're a waste of my deputies' times. The MCSO is not an agency that has anywhere near unlimited resources. I worked with MCSO during my 20-year career extensively, and I'll tell you, they were always lacking personnel. They were always never had enough deputies. They are a critically undermanned agency, and the fact that he's wasting any resources on this at all, where he's basically out there videotaping, recording people, and then making cases and sending them to the prosecutor's office so he can make the determination about whether he wants to go after these people or not, is just pathetic. I think it's pathetic. And I am going to be looking for an alternative to this sheriff come election time. I'll tell you that.
Well, the RLC of Arizona has already endorsed an alternative, and I'll look his name up here in a second. But we do have choices, and this is why it's important to have Republican sheriffs. Now, we've talked a little bit on the show about people talking in politics, talking about out of both sides of their mouths, and this is a clear example where you have them on one hand saying, "We're not writing anybody citations." Oh, but we'll send it to the prosecutor. So they want to be able to have plausible deniability later. At least they want to muddy the issue enough so that when this becomes an election issue in November, they'll say, well, hey, you were allowed to open your business. There was no penalty for opening your business. We're not crushing businesses. We didn't cause this damage, but clearly they did. And so it is a really disgusting political game that they're playing right now. And Doug Ducey has gone along with it. But what you have is these, in many counties, health inspectors running around threatening businesses. And it's almost like vigilantism, where they're making threats, but they're not really willing to put their name on it. Oh, I'm not going to issue you a citation, but maybe you'll get fined later. Maybe you will lose your liquor license. Doug Ducey said that if these businesses open up, that they could lose their liquor licenses. And what is that if not a threat? So they say, oh, it's voluntary. Oh, it's not an order. It's just a nice suggestion.
No,
Baloney.
no, it is not. We've talked about the order, and it does have teeth. And to kind of end this on a more positive note, because this is a tale of three sheriffs, not just one. Two Arizona sheriffs say that they won't enforce the governor's stay-at-home order. This article is dated yesterday. This is from thehill.com. And it says, two county sheriffs in Arizona say they will not be enforcing Governor Ducey's stay-at-home order amid the novel coronavirus pandemic. According to the Arizona Republic, Mojave County Sheriff Doug Schuster and Pinal County Sheriff Mark Lamb have both said they will not arrest or hand out fines to those violating a stay-at-home order issued by Ducey that seeks to limit the spread of the novel coronavirus. And of course, this article, points out the deadly nature of the coronavirus, because of course they have to put some sort of spin there that these sheriffs are irresponsible. Well, in my opinion, these sheriffs are heroes. Doug Schuster and Mark Lamb. If I can, I will try to advocate for you and your campaigns. I've got to look and find when you guys are up for re-election, because I need to send some money your way personally and need to advocate for others to do the same. These are the definition of constitutional sheriffs. This is something that's been advocated for a long time by many people in the liberty movement, that we need constitutional sheriffs, and these are examples of these kinds of men. Not Penzone, who is deferring to the county attorney's office, which, by the way, if I'm not mistaken, that's also what's called a long-form complaint. And what that is that's an arrest that happens behind your back that you never know about unless somebody tells you. If they're submitting cases to the county attorney for review, that is actually a long-form arrest. And basically what they're doing is deferring to the county attorney as far as doing a physical arrest, but that is an arrest. If I understand what Penzone is doing. So I just wanted to point out those two sheriffs as examples of what you should be doing, and an example of Penzone as something as someone not to emulate. And I do want to leave with this as well, because I did share this before, and I'm just going to go with the headline here, and let's put some teeth on the other end of this, and cap this off with another time where I advocate the 14th Amendment. And this article says,
before we move on, both of those sheriffs are up for re-election this year. And so they're running for re-election this year, and so is Penzone. So if you want to make a difference, this is the year to replace Penzone with somebody more responsible, somebody who is going to protect your rights, and re-elect Schuster and Mark Lamb.
There you go. And this is from the Washington Times. It says Barr, which is our Attorney General for the United States, Barr orders legal action against governors whose COVID-19 actions infringe on civil rights. I won't get into more of the meat of this article. I'm just saying you have every right to call your local U.S. attorney and file a complaint against your local police, your local sheriff, your mayor, your governor. You have a legal right to do that under the 14th Amendment, and you should exercise that right.
Yeah, and you and I have gone back and forth a little bit on this. That you've been so angry that you're like, hey, the U.S. Marshals should arrest these politicians right away, put them in jail. They're violating the Constitution. And I've said, hey, we need to take them to court.
That's an emotional reaction, and I apologize for that. That was an emotional reaction, not a rational reaction. But that is where it would lead to. If Attorney Barr does investigate these people, it would be the U.S. Marshal's Office that would arrest these people for violations of the Civil Rights Act and violations of the 14th Amendment. That part is true. I'm just getting ahead of myself. I got ahead of myself because I was emotional.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I see we agree on that now. Boy, I was hoping we could really tear it up here. But well, we do have separation of powers, but these are unconstitutional orders in many cases. And I understand why we allowed it to go this far, because in an emergency, if let's say the United States is attacked, as we were on Pearl Harbor, at Pearl Harbor, nobody denies that the president has the right to immediately call out the military to defend our shores. And when we had this outbreak, a lot of people panicked and said, okay, well, these orders, we don't know if constitutionally they're exactly the right thing to do, but we're willing to give our elected officials the benefit of the doubt because what is the alternative? That we do nothing? But now it's been a month and a half, and we have city councils, and we have Congress, and we have the courts, and we have all of these avenues to debate and discuss it. And you've been hitting this from the very beginning, the LA model, where these mayors are declaring emergency orders, and then the emergency just continues indefinitely. That's not what an emergency is. We should by now have a plan that we've discussed, debated, and voted on. If not the people, then their representatives voted on. But instead, as you've said, these little dictators are just imposing their will with no checks, no balances. It's just unilateral order. And this goes against everything that America is about. This goes against everything that our founding fathers stood for. And I think the American people are sort of at a breaking point. We're willing to give our leaders the benefit of the doubt, but at the same time, we need to calm down. We need to do things the right way. And if we're not willing to do that, then what's the point of having elections in the first place?
No, I agree with you wholeheartedly. The general window we talk about in an emergency is basically 30 days. That's always been kind of the standard. After that
Any
point, it's no longer an emergency executive declaration or executive call, because it takes time to reconvene legislatures. It takes time to reconvene city councils. It takes time to reconvene Congress. I agree with that. I understand that. Sometimes legislatures are very slow moving. That's why we generally defer to the executive branch for emergencies. But we're past that point. That's my point. We're past that point. And I say 100%, if you see violations of your local police, if you're concerned about what your mayor's doing, if you're concerned about what your governor's doing, call your U.S. Attorney's office. You have that right. That is absolutely within your power to do so, and file a complaint on them. The same way that people are ratting out businesses that are opening up too early, you have a recourse as well. Make a report to the U.S. Attorney's office.
Right, and I don't know how long it takes to drive across the city of Phoenix from north to south. What is it? An hour and a half, maybe? This is not like the old days when you would take your horse from wherever, Massachusetts, say, down to the capital. Okay, and that could take days or weeks. This isn't the colonial era. Now we have Zoom, and we have cars, and we have freeways, and we can convene a lot faster. So I think 30 days is probably way too much time. But if but give them time to debate, give them time to deliberate and come up with a plan. And maybe that does take 30 days. I don't know. That sounds
By
like
the
a
way, no,
long
that's a
time to
great,
me.
Pete, that's a great point, because the 30-day window, by the way, it's not like the Constitution. I'm talking about, traditionally how long these orders go in effect before they have to have any substantial review. But you're right. Technology makes a lot of these debates not even worth having, because in terms of the executive privilege, if you will, and their ability to manage a crisis, within, say, 10, 15 days, a legislature should be able to reconvene virtually if necessary, and review this process, and either slow it down, accelerate it, whatever they're going to do. But it should have some sort of review by the local legislature or the national legislature, whatever the case may be. And what we've seen is, and we've seen it for decades, the legislatures continue to erode their own authority at the power of the executive. And that's a dangerous thing. It's a dangerous thing. And I do commend President Trump, because he has not declared martial law. He has not used that executive authority, even though people were begging him to do that. He hasn't done that. And to me, he should get real credit for that.
Yeah, I think he does deserve a lot of credit. And it's unfortunate that his poll numbers right now have they're just not strong enough to win re-election.